So Sheikh Asim al-Hakim, he's a very famous da'i in Saudi Arabia. He was asked the question by Abdul Samad. You all can see my screen, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
It says, Sheikh, is there an attribute of Allah? I'm sorry. Sheikh, is there an attribute of Allah of eyes? If so, if it is, then we take it in the real sense, but without thinking how it is. Please answer. Sheikh answers, of course, Allah has two eyes. In the hadith of the Dajjal, the Prophet describes him as one-eyed, claiming to be God. The Prophet said, and your Lord is not one-eyed, which implies that he, the Almighty, has two eyes. Now, I'm not sure where this guy gets the idea that this implies anything. I don't even know why you'd stop at two eyes. Why not three? Why not four? Why not a million? Like, if we're just, what's implied here is nothing, actually. Maybe Allah has no eyes. But what I want to point out to you is the literalism that this person is employing here. Now remember, my criticism of literalism is that I understand why it exists, because it preserves the nas of a text, okay? But look what he's done here, okay? How is he understanding this hadith? He's understanding it completely literally. Now, what did the Prophet, peace be upon him, tell us was the best thing you could do to protect yourself from Dajjal? He said, read Surah Al-Kahf every Friday. Now, before I kick into the full presentation on Dajjal, I want you to understand that the methodology I'm about to use is not foreign to our religion. In fact, if Surah Al-Kahf is the surah that we use to protect ourselves from Dajjal, then whatever it's teaching us would be something that we would use. So in Surah Al-Kahf, there is an encounter that takes place between Musa, Prophet Moses alayhi salam, and a man named Khidr, which, by the way, means green man, basically, from Akhdar, green. So we have three incidents that happens, okay? Musa is giving a khutbah. Bani Israel says, the best khutbah we've ever heard. You are the most knowledgeable person on earth. Musa agrees. Then Allah reveals to him, no, there's someone who has more knowledge than you, and so you have to go find him at the Majma' al-Bahrain, the joining of two seas. So he takes Yusha with him, his servant boy, and they have to carry a fish in a basket. When they get to a certain place, they take a nap. Yusha sees the fish jump out of the basket, and it goes into the ocean, and he forgets to tell Musa what happened. When he tells Musa, Musa said, that's the sign we're looking for. And so he goes back to the place where that happened, and they find Khidr. And Khidr sitting on a rock. And Musa says, I want to follow you and learn what you know. And Khidr says, you can't be patient with me. And Musa says, Inshallah, I'll be patient. So he says, then follow me, and don't ask me any questions until I explain to you why I did what I did. So first thing they do is they get on a boat. As soon as they get on the boat, it's a relatively modest community. These aren't rich people. Khidr puts a hole in the boat. And Musa is like, how dare you do this to these people, nice people who gave us a ride? And Khidr tells Musa, look, didn't I tell you not to ask me about what I'm doing until I explain it to you? Musa says, okay, forgive me. So then they go to an area and they see some children playing, and Khidr kills one of the little boys. Musa is like, لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا نُكْرًا, like, how dare you do this unthinkable thing? Khidr, once again, he says, Musa, did I not tell you not to ask me about these matters until I explain them to you? Musa says, okay, well, after this, if I make this mistake again, me and you will part ways. And so then they come to a village. And in it, when they arrive, normally the people of the town would welcome visitors and feed them, but they don't show Khidr and Musa any hospitality. So what happens next? Suddenly Khidr starts to repair an old broken wall in the city. And Musa's like, he helps him do it, and then he gets finished. He says, if you wanted, you could have asked these people to pay you for this, because they were very rude to us. And then Khidr says, all right, هذا فراق بيني وبينك. This is where me and you part ways. And so then he begins to explain to him, pay very close attention here, explain to him the ta'wil, the interpretation of what took place. So Musa, he is a scholar of Islam par excellence. He's a messenger of God. He understands the deen better than all of us. But there's something he doesn't yet know. And Khidr knows it. Now Musa, he saw things that Khidr did that were against Sharia, that were unjust. He saw Khidr put a hole in a boat, he saw him kill a boy, and he saw him rebuild this wall, and the people were rude to them. None of this made any sense to Musa, because in his mind, this is wrong, what's happening. But Khidr goes on to explain to him something. He says, the boat belonged to some poor people, and further down the river from us was a king who would seize every nice boat for himself. So my hope was that the king would see that the boat had a small hole in it, which was repairable, by the way, and he wouldn't take their boat away from them. And then later on, they could repair it and they could keep it for themselves. So patience, if he had been patient, right, then Khidr would have explained that to him. But he immediately reacted to what he saw with his eyes, what was zahir and apparent. Next thing, Khidr explains, the boy, it had come to me knowledge that this boy was going to grow up. Allah had basically revealed to him this boy was going to grow up and become a kafir. And not only a kafir, one that was so evil and so bad that it would shake the very faith of his parents, who were believers. So the plan was to get rid of this boy and replace that. Allah would give the family a new boy to replace him. So the last thing that happened is that Khidr informed Musa that the wall belonged to a boy, two orphan boys, because their father had passed away, and he left a treasure under the wall. And because the people of the town were so unwelcoming, Khidr knew that if they found this treasure, because the wall had fallen apart and they would easily be able to see the treasure, then they would just take it from the boys and they wouldn't inherit their wealth. So that his hope was that by the time these boys grew up, the wall would then collapse again, and they would find their treasure, their inheritance. So what is painfully obvious from all this story is that Khidr is teaching us something about distinguishing between what's apparent and the reality of something. And last week we talked about the flying donkey. And I explained that what's apparent from the text is that Dajjal rides on a flying donkey. Its ears are stretched out 40 cubits in each direction. It's made of iron. It goes as fast as the wind. It hops up and down from the heavens to the earth. And that's what the text says. But in this case, we said that when we make a ta'wil of it and we look at the circumstances we're in today, it sounds a whole lot like an airplane. So why, if in fact this is the surah that's going to protect us from Dajjal, then it should teach us something to understand about Dajjal. I hope that was clear. So what are we going to learn about Dajjal this week? Well, let's get this presentation loaded. Okay. Just a quick review of the slides from last week. We mentioned the things that the Messiah is supposed to accomplish when he comes. We mentioned the things that have already taken place and that need to take place in order for the Jews to accept a Messiah. And then we talked about the interpretation of Dajjal in the Quran, where Allah describes him as Jasada, a body without a spirit or a soul. By the way, that word Jasad is used in the Quran to describe the golden calf that Bani Israel worship. Now that's very interesting that they would worship a golden calf that Allah describes as a Jasad. And then he additionally describes the Messiah that they're going to call God as a Jasad. Jasadun Khuwar, the Quran describes the idol in the Quran that Bani Israel worships. Now,
just a question.
Yeah, Bismillah.
Bismillah. Where does the Quran say that? Where does the Quran describe the Messiah as a jasad they will worship?
No, not the Messiah, the Dajjal. Last week we talked about this section in Surah Sad, where Allah mentions that he tried Suleiman alayhi salam with fitna. What did we say the greatest fitna was according to the Prophet? Dajjal. What did we say that Allah informed every prophet of from the time of Adam or from the time of Nuh? Of Dajjal. So he said he cast onto Solomon's throne a jasad. Okay? And we said that Dajjal wants to be the Messiah. And the Messiah, according to the Jews, inherits the kingdom of David. Who inherited the kingdom from David? Solomon. So when we put all of these things together, the fact that Prophet Solomon would have been warned about Dajjal, that here we have him being tested with a fitna. We said the greatest fitna is the fitna of Dajjal. So it's most likely what this is talking about here. And then secondly, that Suleiman, of all people, would be warned especially about Dajjal, because what Dajjal wants is to inherit his kingdom, the kingdom of Israel. So he casts on his throne. And we talked about the word throne is used in the Quran for a literal kursi, a chair. But when you're talking about a king, it symbolizes something. It symbolizes their authority over a kingdom. So Dajjal wants to inherit the authority over the kingdom. And then we said that Solomon's response to this, being informed about Dajjal and what Dajjal wants to do, and the fitna that it'll cause, is that he makes this dua, Rabbi ighfir li, O Allah, forgive me, وَهَبْ لِي مُلْكًا لَا يَنْبَغِي لِأَحَدٍ مِّن بَعْدِي, and do not allow anyone to inherit my kingdom after me. So Solomon's response is to ask Allah not to allow Dajjal to inherit his kingdom. And of course, Allah will answer the dua of Suleiman by sending Isa to kill him before he can rule the world as the Messiah completely. He'll get to do it briefly in an incomplete way, but not in the total way of ruling until the end of the world, like Isa alayhi salam. And we say this is a ta'wil of this ayah. Okay, you will not find what I just mentioned to you in any tafsir. It doesn't exist. This is a modern interpretation of this ayah. And it requires that you bring a lot of outside information in, which we talked about last week in my presentation about the methodology I use for interpreting Quran and Hadith. We talked about the different things different logical tools you use. And one of them was that the Quran assumes you have outside knowledge sometimes. So that's why I'm bringing these Hadith in to explain these various parts of these ayat. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir.
Okay, who are we talking about here? Dajjal. The coolest thing about the Arabic language is that from a word you can derive a root, and from that root you can get a very, very deep understanding of what you're dealing with. So Dajjal comes from the three-letter word root da, dal, jim, lam. Dajjal. Now this, according to Hamza Yusuf, was a word used prior to Islam to describe Arabs who would cheat each other when they would sell and buy animals. So, for example, a camel in pre-Islamic Arabia would have a skin disease. Like you may have heard of the disease mange. Dogs get something called mange, where you'll see like hairs falling off parts of their body. It's a skin disease. And what they would do is they would take tar, okay, or pitch, and they would smear over that area. I'm assuming here to make the good hair kind of like cover the bad hair up, so that the animal did not look sick. And they would sell the animal, even though it was diseased, as a healthy animal. And then the person would buy it and they would find out later that this is diseased. Okay, so it's trickery. Means to lie, to cover truth with falsehood, to confuse or mix things. Okay, a couple of words in Arabic. Yudajjal means to cover lead with gold, right? So you have something lead, which is, you know, poisonous, but you cover it with gold. Or to take something cheap and make it look worthwhile. Dujul, like something that's lowest or basest or the meanest sort of people. Dajjal, a great company of men covering the land with merchandise. Okay. So from this, we understand a lot of what we're dealing with when Allah calls him Al-Masih al-Dajjal, meaning Messiah, but a lie, not true, false, confused. So he must impersonate the Messiah. That's the job he was created for. He's a fitna. Allah made him. He's a creation of Allah. He's here to try you and me. He's here to try our faith, to test us. And he has to create something called Haretz Yitzrael, which is the entire land of Israel has to be from the Euphrates River in Iraq today until the Nile here in Egypt. And it has to include the desert of the south, which is Arabia. If you ever heard the hadith about Dajjal trying to invade Mecca and Medina, the reason why is because children of Israel consider it to be part of their land, especially Medina. They consider Medina to be it. But because, why? Because Abraham was there, and they consider Abraham a Jew. Remember, Quran asked the rhetorical question to the Jews and Christians, why do you call Abraham a Jew or a Christian when the gospel and the Torah had not yet been revealed? So that means Iran, Egypt, Pakistan, and Syria must all submit to Israel in order for the Jews to accept that this is the true Messiah. Isn't it fascinating today? We see all of these countries. We have now UAE, we have Sudan, we have I know those two countries for sure have all normalized relationships with Israel.
Bahrain.
Bahrain, I guess. Tishad or Chad and Oman have now opened, I believe, flights in their countries to Israel. And the Arabs must be ruled. Very important. This is a prophecy in the Quran or in the Bible about the Messiah, that he has to rule over the Arabs. Okay. So here we're going to start bringing the most important hadith that we need to know about Dajjal. So we've mentioned where in the Quran we believe Dajjal is being talked about. So Allah informs the messenger, between the time of the creation of Adam and the resurrection day, there is nothing greater than the fitna of Dajjal. You would think, brothers and sisters, you would think that a Sahih hadith like this in the book by Imam Muslim, that's clearly telling us that there, of all the things we could talk about on the minbar, on Yom al-Jumu'ah, that are going to be a trial for mankind, that you would think that this would be a subject talked about at least once a year on the minbar, at least once a year, if not once every like 3 months. But how many times have you ever gone to a khutbah and heard anything about Dajjal? The Prophet warned that one of the signs of the end of time is, or the sign that you know Dajjal is coming, is that no one talks about him anymore. So consider yourselves to be part of a select group of people on earth today that are actually talking about this subject. And that's why we have to teach this class. But here we have something very important, that this is greater than anything we're going to deal with. Now, what is the most important sign the Prophet gives us about Dajjal? This is your miftah, your key to understanding the subject of Dajjal. He says, no prophet was sent, but that he warned his people about the one-eyed liar. He is a'war, one-eyed. Okay, remember this picture? At the very beginning of our lesson, I showed you this picture. I said if you type in Dajjal on the internet, this is what you're going to see. Okay. So, but your Lord is not one-eyed, and between his eyes are written Kaf, Fa, Ra, which can generally be understood as kafir. Both the illiterate and the literate will be able to read it. Okay, now I know some of you that came to my very, very, very first lesson on this before we officially started this, you already had me go through this hadith. Just be patient for the people who weren't there. Another hadith, the Prophet mentions, I've told you much about Dajjal, the Antichrist. So much that I fear you will not understand. Now listen, this is so important. He is one-eyed, with his eye neither prominent nor sunken in, meaning it's not bulging out, but it's not like inside his head. If you become confused about him, then remember that your Lord is not one-eyed. Okay? Now, in usul al-fiqh, when it comes to hadith, we always interpret what the Prophet is saying literally, unless we have a reason to go to a metaphorical interpretation. You guys all heard Hamza Yusuf say this when we did our presentation on signs of the hour. Hamza Yusuf said it just like that. He said, in usul, we always interpret the Prophet's words literally, unless we have a reason to go to a metaphorical interpretation. I'm about to show you the reason we have to go to a metaphorical interpretation here, and not a literal one. The literal interpretation is Dajjal will be exactly what that picture is. A one-eyed guy with kafir written on his forehead. But a couple of things here should be glaringly obvious, painfully obvious to you, that don't make any sense. Number one, that God has eyes, when clearly the Quran says, Laysa kamithlihi shay, wa huwa samiyun basir. There is nothing like Allah, yet he is able to hear and see everything. Meaning that of all things that are created, none of them are comparable to the Creator. They're not like him. You can't liken Allah to the creation. La tadribul amthal. Like Allah says, don't give examples for God. Don't try to liken God to things in the creation. So what we have here is something that should stick out to us as strange. Why would Allah say this to us? Secondly, he says that there'll be something written on his forehead, but he says that illiterate people will be able to read it. Ghairi katib is what I believe the hadith says. So you have katib wa ghairi katib, someone who can read and write and someone who cannot read and write. But illiterate people can't read. That's by definition what they are, illiterate. So how can they read anything if they're illiterate? That's why I believe, and so many other people believe, this hadith should not be understood literally. Because literally it doesn't make any sense, and that cannot be possible. The messenger, according to all Aqidah books that you'll ever read, like things that you're responsible to believe as a Muslim, is intelligent and that he conveyed the message clearly to us. And yet this does not make sense. We cannot believe that the Prophet said this if he meant it literally. Furthermore, the Prophet is actually scared that me and you are going to misunderstand him. Look at the second paragraph. I'm afraid that you will not understand. So, what does he mean then? Notice that he says the illiterate and the literate, but he mentions them as believers. Now, I don't have it written here on the screen, but in the Arabic, it says the believer will be able to see. Okay? Every believer will be able to see. There's another wording of this hadith. What does it mean to be a believer? It means you are mu'min, you have iman. Okay? So, iman in what? You believe in what? Well, there are 6 articles of faith that we all know of. We believe in Allah, we believe in the messenger of Allah, we believe in the books. So if we believe in the books, even if we can't read them, but we know the information that's in them, someone has told us what's in the Quran and we have iman in it, right? There were many Sahaba who couldn't read and write, but they heard the Quran and they understood it, okay? You don't have to be able to read and write to understand what the Quran is saying when you hear it recited. Then one of the most apparent things you're going to hear in the Quran is A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. إِنَّمَا الْمَسِيحُ عِيسَى ibn Maryam Rasulullah. That indeed the Messiah is Jesus, the son of Mary. So, that's a clear and ambiguous statement. It is muhkam. It is not mutashabihat. It's not allegorical. Indeed, the Messiah is Jesus, the son of Mary. So, if you know that's true, and you know it's true because you believe the Quran and the Prophet are from God, because the Prophet also mentioned that belief in the Messiah is part of salvation in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Even if you can't read or write, if anyone comes to you and says, I'm the Messiah, and they're not Jesus, you will reject them immediately. Even if they are ruling the world, even if they can perform miracles, even if the Jews have accepted them, even if kada wa kada wa kada, you will reject them immediately. Even if to your eyes, remember, guys, it looks like the Messiah, but something's not right. It's not Jesus. And so you will see that this person is kafir. They don't have to have it written on their forehead because you have iman. And with that iman, that's how you see the world. You don't see the world just with your eyes. You're seeing the world through the nur of the Quran, enlightening your mind up to the way things really are, not just how they appear. The reality is Jesus is the Messiah. It cannot be anyone else. So even if someone comes along and they do every single thing the Messiah is supposed to do, and they dazzle your ears and eyes with every kind of miraculous thing, you will reject them if you have iman. You will see that this person is a liar, and they are kafir. And you don't have to be able to read or write. Ahmed, they're calling you. So, why am I telling you all this? Because this is the key to understanding the majority of the signs of the hour. That you're not necessarily dealing with information that the prophet is trying to tell you the literal reality of it. He's telling you what he knows using his language, his words, in a way that his companions would have been able to understand and memorize, so forth and so on. So the prophet, peace be upon him. 1 second, guys. I'm sorry. Okay, now I have to stop at this point because I need you guys to tell me how are you understanding what I'm saying right now? Does this make sense to you? Is it going over your head?
So I took down a few notes, and from what I am understanding is there are instances where we have to really understand, if we're given a verse from the Quran or even a hadith, we have to understand whether it is to be understood literally or metaphorically. And an example you gave us was the literal understanding that the Dajjal has one eye and has the word kafir written over his head. But one example of a metaphorical understanding would be that we are not to liken Allah to his creation. We're not supposed to say just because, or we're not supposed to say that he has two eyes. Maybe he has 0 eyes, maybe he has a million eyes. So that, in that context of what that hadith was, or what that verse was, I forgot what it was, we're not supposed to take it literally. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's kind of like the gist of what you were getting at before.
Yeah. Well, the most important thing was the whole thing that an illiterate person would be able to see, read something. That's the most important clue that this is not meant to be understood literally, because that doesn't make sense. So, and also don't forget the story of Musa and Khidr. Remember that the Surah Al-Kahf is supposed to be your guide during the time of Dajjal. So if in it there's a story about an event that takes place between people where one person sees what's happening and they don't understand the meaning of it and they become confused, right? Then that should tell us that when we're dealing with the subject of Dajjal, that maybe what we're seeing, the literal nas, the text, is not what's meant to be understood. That maybe it requires sabr, okay, time for us to digest the information and try to interpret it based on the reality of the world we're in. So I said that the hadith, well, I guess in conclusion, the hadith still remains true. It's actually a brilliant hadith, but it's not meant to be understood literally. Now, let me add one additional point. If Dajjal is such a great fitna, and the Prophet is telling us a very plain and obvious sign that anyone would be able to see, non-Muslim, Muslim, bad Muslim, good Muslim. I mean, immediately somebody comes, he's got a kafir written on his forehead, then everyone's going to be like, this is a kafir. It's written on his forehead. But he's a fitna. It would never be that obvious. There's no way that it would be that obvious if he's really a fitna. Because that's not a fitna at all. That's plain and clear. Like no one would fall for that. But what is a fitna is a man who comes who doesn't have one eye, doesn't have anything written on his forehead, is ruling the world from Jerusalem. The Jews believe he's the Messiah. He can perform miracles. He's ruling the land from the Euphrates River to the Nile. All the Arabs have submitted to him. That's a fitna. That's going to test your faith and my faith. Because the apparent reality of things to our eyes is going to be telling us this is the Messiah. He's fulfilled all the prophecies. But the unapparent, meaning the iman, the nur inside of you from your knowledge of what the Quran says about reality, which is that Jesus is the Messiah. This cannot possibly be him. This man is not Jesus. And even if his name happens to be Jesus, let's say, for example, that Allah tests us additionally by having an Antichrist who comes and his name is actually Jesus, but he's not Ibn Maryam. He's not the son of the Virgin Mary, right? His mom is someone else. Then we have even more reason to look at this person and see kafir. Not literally, but we see that this person is kafir. They're a disbeliever. They've rejected truth. They're claiming to be the Messiah. They can't possibly be the Messiah. It's only Jesus. That is a fitna, guys. If Allah sends a man and he doesn't have kafir written on his forehead, but it requires you to be a mu'min to see kafir, even if you can't read. That's what I'm trying to tell you guys. This is the key. This lesson tonight is so important for you to grasp. If you're not digesting it tonight, it's okay. I didn't understand this the first time I heard it. It took a lot of time for me to grasp this, because we're so used to just the scientism of today, where everything is just what you touch, smell, taste, see, and hear, and anything beyond that is not true. We don't recognize how brainwashed most of us are into accepting that only what is apparent is what is reality. But the Quran comes from another world. It's not from the Prophet Muhammad. He didn't write it. He didn't make it up. He wouldn't even have been able to. You guys, maybe one day I'll post my article I wrote on how it's literally impossible for the Prophet to have come up with the Quran. It's impossible. But so it's not coming from a place that you can study in a laboratory. So it may take a lot of time for this lesson tonight to sink in, but my main point is that to understand these basic hadith about Dajjal is that Allah is giving us through the Quran and through His Messenger a interpretive set of keys to be able to grasp this knowledge. And it requires faith. It requires patience. It requires things that Surah Al-Kahf is telling us to have. Okay? Without patience, without faith, you're not going to pass the test of Dajjal at all. And I'm telling you, I'm warning you, when Dajjal comes, and he doesn't literally have kafir written on his forehead, and he doesn't literally have one eye, you're going to have scholars. Let me show you one of them. Like this guy. He's going to say, this is not Dajjal. I don't see kafir on his forehead. He's got two eyes. No way. And so our own people, I'm not saying Asim is not a Muslim, but our own people, our own scholars, people we look up to, people maybe we even like their lectures and we read their books and whatever, they're going to mislead us because they failed to use the Quran and the Hadith to interpret these things for us. And how many times in the Quran, in Surah Ibrahim, in Surah Al-Baqarah, in Surah Al-A'raf, does Allah have people in the hellfire arguing with their leaders? Arguing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, like you misled us, right? No, it's up to every single believer to grasp this information and digest it and use it properly. If you don't, then you deserve punishment like everybody else. There's an ayah in the Quran, وَقَالُوا لَوْ نَسْمَعُ أَوْ نَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. If we had just listened and used our brains, we wouldn't be in the hellfire right now. This knowledge you guys are learning tonight is so important for your future. Because, I mean, I'm telling you, when Dajjal comes, this fitna is going to be so hard to pass. When you literally see Muslims around you, your own people, maybe your own family members, your own friends, the people in your masjid, your imam, the scholars that you like, all telling you something you know is not true. It's going to test your faith. It's going to rock you like like an earthquake. You're going to be like, no, this guy is Dajjal. Like, don't you understand? He's not the Messiah. And they're going to be like, no, there's no kafir on his forehead. He's got 2 eyes. That's what I'm afraid of. And alhamdulillah, for my teachers, Omar Zaid, Omar Baloch, these are people in America. One day I'll introduce you guys to them. Maybe I'll have them come in this class, who've helped me understand these things. Because that time is coming very close, guys. You will probably see this in your lifetime. Definitely in the lifetime of your children. Okay, so that's, I think, enough for tonight's class. And I'm so sorry I'm really super late. Once again, it wasn't intentional. Questions, comments, and concerns?
Yeah, just 2 quick things. So just to make sure we understand, so the biggest takeaway, or one of the biggest takeaways from tonight's lecture, was understanding that the Dajjal is fitna, and so it won't be obvious that he'll have kafir on his head and he'll have 1 eye. That's the whole point of him being a fitna, is that it'll be so well deceiving that many people will think he is the Messiah, or that he's not the Dajjal because he doesn't have those things. When in reality, because he's fitna, that's exactly why he would be the Dajjal. It wouldn't be obvious, and so that's why. And the only way for us to really know that is that our iman will tell us automatically he's false, and that's one of the things we can't really measure or, like study in the lab, like you were saying. Is that right?
Yeah, you're getting there. You're almost there. Remember, if you have iman, we have to ask iman in what? What do you have faith in? And we said that on a just basic level, you have faith in the messenger, right? That would be the most basic thing you'd have faith in. And what does the messenger come with? A message. What's his message? The Quran. Well, both from the lips of the prophet and from the speech of Allah, we have the very clear statement that Jesus is the Messiah. It's not anyone else. But the fitna of Dajjal, remember, is that he comes and literally does things only God can do. He's going to raise people from the dead. There are hadith that mention he kills a person and raises them from the dead. That he causes it to rain. By the way, I'm going to show you how all this stuff is already here in our next lesson, inshallah. That most of the things that Dajjal will be able to do, we can already see them actually happening around us. But so to your eyes, it's going to be, you're going to be like, this is Dajjal. This is the Messiah. Like your mind, devoid of revelation, devoid of iman, is going to be telling you that this is the Messiah. Like you won't be able to reject that unless you have faith that what the Quran says is true and the Prophet said is true. And you don't have to be able to read to have that. Now, I do want to just say something here. It is entirely possible that Dajjal will be a one-eyed cyclops person with kafir written on his forehead. I'm not ruling that out, okay? So don't go home tonight and tell you that Brother Isa said it's impossible that Dajjal will have. Don't go tell people that. I didn't say that. I'm saying we have reason to believe that the Prophet is not speaking literally here. And that if Dajjal is really a fitna, then there's no way this would be as obvious. What's wrong, Ahmed? Come here. Come here. Okay. The whole family is now crying, so. All right. Any other questions, comments, or concerns?
Yeah, just one more. Sorry for just to follow
You
up
seem
on
to
what
be the only one asking questions.
I'm sorry, I know, but like I wrote down these questions, and like in last lectures, I don't have time to ask them. But I promise this is the last one. You were
It's
talking,
fine. I just wanted to, I wanted to make
promise
sure
this is the last
everyone
one.
else understands too.
uh, and this is like just a technical thing, and it kind of goes back to what you were just now saying about recognizing that we can observe these signs of the coming hour around us, and with the Dajjal. Just in the future, would it be okay for you to spend a little bit of time on some other prophecies that that were foretold, so that like for example, I really enjoyed the example you gave us about the construction of the tall buildings by the naked barefooted Bedouins, if there's time, because I think a lot of Muslims would benefit from this type of information as well.
Yeah. There's so much to talk about when it comes to this subject that this one specifically is just really important to cover. And it's to me, it's like probably the most important one, because it's the greatest fitna. All the other signs to me are secondary. So forgive me if I've spent maybe too much time on the one about
No. Yeah, it's not a problem. I think because maybe this is just me personally, but the way I see it is once I've established that Islam is the undeniable 100% truth through these foretold prophecies, then literally anything that is entailed within the religion, either on the days of or the signs of the final hour of the day of judgment, anything regarding ad-Dajjal, anything regarding I don't know, morality or Sharia or whatever it is, once it's been established, and again, this is just for me personally, once it's been established that Islam is true, then there's no reason for me to question anything.
Well, be careful with one thing. I just want to warn you about something.
Mm-hmm.
The Quran is true. The Prophet is true. But what is Islam? This is a very important question to ask yourself. And who decides what Islam is? This is something I've been thinking a lot about recently, because it seems different people have a different definition. So establish firstly that the Quran and the Prophet are true, because those things are we can have 100% faith in. But
Mm-hmm.
as far as what makes up Islam, there's a lot of differences of opinion about that, unfortunately. I wish I could tell you that there's a one easy definition, but there's not.
Sheikh, can't we say that? I mean, this is just a preliminary answer. I know you can go a lot deeper. Like you could say that Islam is to submit, like no matter what it is, just give up and do what's right. Give everything else up. I mean, you could. That's just something that came to my mind. But also, like the five pillars, right? In the hadith of Jibril, didn't Jibril ask Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? He asked him, "Akhbirni an al-Islam," and he told him Islam is to say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, and then the five pillars.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm just saying, like someone might say, for example, like, what are the things that make up Islam? Right. Of course, we can all agree on the five pillars, but we all know there's more to Islam than those five pillars, right?
Yeah.
Way more. So, what makes Islam? You know what I mean?
Actually, I think I have some sort of an answer for that. Like you know how so many people say Islam began 1400 years ago, but we still believe in Jesus, we believe in Moses, we believe in the Torah, we believe in the Injil, we believe that those revelations were given to those prophets. So based on that understanding, I've been led to believe that Islam has existed ever since the time of Adam alayhi salam. People who followed Adam were Muslims, people who followed Moses were Muslims, people who followed Jesus were Muslims, but they didn't do typical Muslim things that we do today. They didn't pray 5 times a day. They didn't go to Hajj. They didn't do these things that constitute what being a Muslim is today. Now, having said that, again, this is just my understanding. Judaism ended up changing, turned into Christianity. Christianity ended up changing, ended up being, some kind of polytheistic trinity, whatever. And then Islam came along one final time to reestablish our connection with Allah. And it was foretold that no other religion, no other prophet will come after that. That's it. There's no more Like it won't be changed again, not like Judaism and Christianity. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is Islam is, like Adi was saying, it can go beyond just simply uh, saying means submission to God, but ideally that's what it seems like it was in all of mankind, was just submitting to God and following whatever God says, whether it was in the time of Noah or Adam or Moses or Jesus, whatever it was. Ideally the message stayed the same. So I think that's kind of why an issue I have, why people say Islam began 1400 years ago, where it just came out of nowhere. It was like, like just by a random person in the desert.
And all that other history of the world, nothing was true.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It really irks me when people say like Islam is only 1400 years old, because it seems pretty stupid that, like, what about all the people that came before 1400 years? Are they going straight to hell? What about, who followed Noah or whatever? So that's
Well, I mean,
kind of
in a
the
nutshell, you find the answer in the very beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah. Allah tells you about Adam. He creates a being that is going to choose between right and wrong, and he puts him in an environment full of right and wrong, and he sends him guidance, and he has to use his free choice to submit to the guidance, and that's how he gets back to Allah. So in a nutshell, that's what Islam is. It's whatever time in history you were born in, truth came to you. It's called Deen al-Haq, the way of truth. Truth came to you in whatever form, Torah, Quran, whatever, and you submitted to it. You chose to follow it and not all the other ways. Then you were a Muslim practicing Islam, in a nutshell.
Exactly, yeah. And you would be a Muslim in that time, even though you wouldn't be called a Muslim.
All right, any more burning questions? I probably need to go ahead and shut this meeting down.
That's it for me. I'm sorry. I'm done.
No, you're fine. Actually, I don't have a problem. I like answering questions, but I just wanted to make sure the other people in the meeting understood our lesson tonight. If you're not clear, tell me. I mean, it's not like, I mean, I'm okay with that. It just means that I need to do a better job next time.
No, Sheikh, I think it's all good. Like this, like you said, this topic it's complicated. But that's why we're recording it. So, anyone who didn't really get anything, we've got the whole week to at least go through the recording, and then, like, I encourage anyone who has questions to put them on the group chat. I mean, that's what it's for. I don't want the group chat just to be like scheduling the meetings. Like, we can have discussions on it, right, Sheikh?
Yes. Please. I love answering questions for you guys. Next week, inshallah, we're going to be talking about how the signs of Dajjal are all coming true around us. We're going to be showing you that all the things that Dajjal is able to do are actually already available to him. How Dajjal will have the powers that he is supposed to have, the godlike powers, but that in reality, they're not godlike powers, that he's basically using technology to achieve things that only God can do. Okay? In other words, what appears to the eyes is not the reality of the situation. That's your key for understanding the subject of Dajjal. Don't let your eyes deceive you. Don't let your ears deceive you. You have to use the Quran and Hadith to penetrate the reality of the situation. And then you will not be deceived by the fitna of Dajjal at all, even if you have to die. And that's the condition of the believer in the time of Dajjal, that we will be persecuted for our faith. One of the greatest persecutions that will happen is that Islam and Christianity will be made illegal when Dajjal comes. Why? I want you to answer that question for me in the chat. Why will Islam and Christianity be made illegal when Dajjal comes? Why will it no longer even be permissible for you to practice these religions? Please answer that question in the chat, and I'll give you the answer next week, inshallah. Subhanak Allahumma wa bihamdika wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barak ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.